Welcome back, folks, to Let's Play Broken Sword, Shadow of the Templars. When last we left off, we finally managed to encounter Jacques Marquet, briefly before he was killed by an imposter doctor. He told us that we should take the gem to the Grand Master as soon as possible, which, if we know anything about the Templars, would pretty much imply that Marquet was indeed working for... well, that would be impossible. The Templars are gone, aren't they? They're long gone. And so now we're going to go off to the museum and talk to the expert that Nicole suggested that we go and talk to, but not before examining everything here.
It was a food store selling fruit and vegetables.
Because we might as well.
The shop window featured a display of gowns and women's stuff.
Okay.
The shop window featured a display...
And let's have a look at these.
They were lilies or tulips. Some kind of flowers, anyhow. Pretty, I guess, if you like that sort of thing. Me? I couldn't see the point of buying something that was already half dead.
George is an expert on all things flowers.
The woman was doing something with a pair of needles that couldn't be described as knitting. She was a cheery old soul, the kind you'd walk across the street to avoid.
And now, let's walk towards the ceaseless drone of traffic and go to that museum. We need to talk to the person who, is there, or hopefully is there. We need some answers. Also, there are a few places we really can't visit anymore, because there's no need to. Let's go. Let's have a look at this. Because we have the opportunity to, after all. Let's do so.
Through the grimy glass, I could see several large shapes in a gloomy room. What they were, I couldn't imagine.
Also, there's this. We can look at this.
Access to the side and rear of the museum building was blocked by a dense clump of bushes.
Well, let's try anyway.
A real macho guy would have plunged straight into the spiky, scratchy bushes. Not me.
Fair enough. And now let's look at the entrance to the museum. Before we head in... oh, we have a lot to look at in the museum, don't we? Oh.
You have left it very late, monsieur.
Late for what?
Anything. I am closing the museum soon. You wouldn't like to get locked in. I can tell you. Not in this gallery.
Why not?
It is haunted, monsieur.
You don't believe in ghosts, surely.
Oh, yes, I do. 7 years ago, a lad managed to hide in here. He'd made a bet with his friends, I suppose. When I found him in the morning, he was cold as ice and stiff as a board.
Well, what was the cause of death?
They said it was a brain tumor. But on his face was a look of stark, desperate terror such as I have never seen before.
Scary.
I'm not quite sure I'm inclined to believe you. Mainly because you've not exactly been truthful at all. Ever. Also, we have a new item to show you.
Does this apparatus mean anything to you?
No, monsieur.
Fair enough. Let's ask about this.
The sign on the tripod says it was found at a Templar preceptory.
It does?
You don't know anything about the tripod, do you?
No, I don't. I never had much of a start in life, you see. I owe what little education I gained to my uncle. He was an optician, but he also doubled as the village school teacher. He taught me the alphabet. Wait, 19 letters of it. The bottom row of the chart was too small even for him to read, so he left them out.
Why don't you start over and enroll for adult education?
You know, I never thought of that. Do you think, if I studied hard and did all my homework, I could be a professor of history?
At your age? Dream on.
It's worth a try, George. He maybe could do it.
Can you give me any further information about the tripod?
Certainly, monsieur. It's infamous. That tripod, that belonged to John Dee.
Are you sure?
What's the importance of John Dee's tripod?
Dee was the most famous escapologist of the 16th century. The Houdini of his time.
Don't you mean alchemist? Escapologists use ropes, chains, and handcuffs, not tripods.
Well, whatever it was, that is the tripod he used in his experiments.
I'm starting to believe less and less what you're actually saying.
What kind of experiments did John Dee perform with his tripod?
Oh, the usual. Didn't you study chemistry at school?
Yeah, but we skipped over thaumatology.
There's a lot to talk about this tripod.
Can I take a closer look at the tripod?
What? Get it out of the case? Ah, no! That tripod is protected by a sophisticated surveillance system.
How sophisticated?
A painfully loud alarm bell.
Ooh, yeah, I was about to mention the alarm bell there, but we could talk about it now.
How is the alarm bell triggered?
By the slightest pressure on or movement of any part of the case wherein that tripod is situated.
That's a pretty terrible system, because as soon as somebody touched the glass, the alarm would go off.
It strikes me that to call your alarm system sophisticated is, well, stretching the truth a little.
It has never failed yet. The sophistication is in its simplicity.
Fair enough.
Thanks for your help.
We have a lot to look at here. It was very weird, actually. Well, it wasn't weird at all. It's quite expected to, when I went round the museum here the first time and tried to examine everything, and of course he wasn't actually examining it, let's actually examine things now.
It was a statue from ancient Egypt. Those old civilizations sure could teach us a few things about art and beauty.
Yeah, there's a lot to actually look at, isn't there? Let's have a look.
A metal rod attached to the wall was connected to the window.
Okay.
The case contained some fragments of pottery. They looked to me like broken flower pots. Above them, a sign read, L'Age Paléolithique.
Fair enough. What about this?
It was a tapestry of a lady, a lion, and a unicorn. If I'd had more time, I could have stared at it all day.
But you really don't, because you came just before closing time.
The totem pole looked distinctly out of place in the setting of the museum.
Does it? Well, I suppose it does, in a way. Let's look at the sarcophagus. An item we can still use.
It was an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus with a beautifully painted effigy of its owner on the lid.
Okay. Anything else we can look at? Well, there's the tripod. We need to look at that anyway.
The case contained the tripod shown on the manuscript.
Fair enough. And there's this person that we can look at.
He was a thin-faced, pallid guy with a questionable taste in outlandish clothes. My mother used to dress like that.
Well, let's talk to him. He might be important.
I beg your pardon. Are you André Lobineau?
That's me. You want my autograph?
No, I was told you may be able to help me.
Help?
My name is George Stobart. I'd like your professional opinion.
Well, okay, shoot.
All right. What do you think about this tissue?
What does this tissue mean to you?
Nothing.
Oh, short and to the point.
I'd like to shake you by the hand, André.
Not now, Georgie.
Fair enough.
Do you have any use for this, André?
Shouldn't think so, Georgie.
What about this plaster?
Do you recognize this white powder, André?
No.
Well, we're going through these items pretty quickly.
Does this matchbook mean anything to you?
Alamut is the name of the place where the Hashashin were based.
Where is it?
Somewhere in what used to be called Persia. I'm not too hot on modern geography, I'm afraid. The most recent map I have shows America as an English colony.
That's a pretty old map, and that's a pretty big clue.
What do you make of this tool?
Interesting. Where did you get it?
From a dig in Paris.
Vraiment? I didn't realize there were any excavations in progress in the city.
There aren't. George, in the way he said it, is basically pulling your leg.
What do you make of this ID card?
Nothing.
I'm a little wary of showing him the gem.
Does the guy in this photograph look familiar to you?
No.
What about this red nose?
Take a look at this nose, Lobineau.
It really doesn't interest me, Georgie.
What about this gem?
What do you make of this?
It's the biggest gemstone I've ever seen. Where did you get it?
From Professor Pegram's messenger boy.
Pegram? Professor Nigel Pegram? He's in Ireland, investigating a Templar site, isn't he?
He was, until he disappeared.
Did Pegram find this on his dig?
Yeah, the site where this was found was a Templar castle. Do you think it could be part of the Templar treasure?
No, I shouldn't think so. You're not one of those crazies who think the Templars still exist, are you?
Well, I try to keep an open mind on the matter.
We have a lot that we can talk about. We can talk about Pegram. We can talk about the murderer. We can talk about the tripod. We can talk about a lot of things. Let's talk about the murderer first.
Have you ever heard of the Hashashin?
Why, yes. It was a radical Muslim sect whose name became synonymous with murder. It was formed in 11th century Persia, shortly before the Crusades.
At roughly the same time as the Templars.
Yes, they gave a new word to our language. Assassini, the assassins.
You see, I thought that this, the icon there was in generally just about the actual incident with the murder of Marquet, but it seems like it's being used more generally for conversation topics. But let's keep talking.
How did the assassins get their name?
From the legends surrounding the secrets of their initiation rites. A young man who sought to join the sect was given hashish until he drifted into dreams. He awoke to find himself in a fabulous garden with everything he could wish for. The freshest water, the most delicious food, the choicest hash, and the most delectable women imaginable.
Cool. Do you have the address?
I haven't finished the story. There was a price to pay for this taste of paradise.
Wouldn't you just know it?
The young man would wake the next day to find himself back in the real world. He was told that he'd been given a glimpse of the heaven reserved for holy martyrs. A heaven he would enjoy for eternity if he was willing to join the Hashashin.
Let's hear some more.
How did the assassins operate?
Well, as I explained, the new recruits would be only too willing to die for the cause. They'd be instructed in the use of the dagger, poisons, and disguise. Then, the Grand Master of the sect would name an enemy of Allah.
And they'd stop at nothing to eliminate that enemy.
You got it. They were fearless and deadly.
Does the cult of the assassins still exist?
Take a look around at the world today. You tell me.
Let's talk about Pegram, shall we?
Do you know Pegram well?
Not really. I met him at a conference. I would have liked to talk to him in depth, but I didn't have time.
When was this?
Oh, back in the summer, July, I think.
The second week of July?
Maybe. Yes, it was, just before Bastille Day.
So Pegram was in Paris at the same time as the other victims.
Pardon? Victims of what?
Nothing. Just thinking aloud.
You really should stop thinking aloud, George, and start thinking in your head, like you do with your monologues.
I think you ought to know that the tripod is going to be stolen.
The Lochman tripod? No.
It's true. I can give you a description of the thieves.
Before the supposed event has taken place?
I heard them planning the raid.
They're wasting their time. The tripod is protected by a state-of-the-art alarm system.
Well, don't say I didn't warn you.
And I've heard about this state-of-the-art alarm system. It truly isn't that state-of-the-art.
Why don't you loan the tripod to me for safekeeping?
Because I'd never see it again.
Well, don't you trust me?
It's not a question of trust, George. That tripod is hundreds of years old and extremely fragile.
I get your point.
Yeah, it would pretty much just fall apart.
Does the name Montfaucon mean anything to you?
Sure, it was the most grisly spectacle in Paris until the Revolution.
A public toilet?
Montfaucon was the place of execution for many thousands. A dark temple of death, with row upon row of arches, each one framing a grim exhibit. Scores of rotting corpses swung on creaking rope, while the crows devoured their flesh.
That explains the image of the hanged man. I found a reference to Montfaucon in Ireland, in a village called Lochmarn.
Maybe we'll be going there.
Where was the site of Montfaucon?
To the northeast, near the Canal Saint-Martin, but there's nothing there now. The old gibbet was torn down during the Revolution.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the manuscript. We've sort of danced around the subject of the manuscript, but I think it's time to mention it.
I'd like your opinion on a medieval manuscript.
Vraiment? Do you have it with you?
No, it's too fragile. And besides, there are certain people who'd stop at nothing to get their hands on it.
Intriguing. Do you have a copy of the text?
There isn't much, only a few Latin phrases. I was kind of hoping you'd help decipher the pictures.
Without seeing the manuscript, that's a tall order.
Just tell me one thing. What does the image of two men riding on the same horse suggest to you?
The Knights Templar. Does the Templar seal appear on this manuscript? I'd love to see that for myself.
We can talk about the Templars, we can also talk about Nicole. Let's talk about the Templars first.
Can you tell me anything about the Knights Templar?
I sure can, Georgie. Soldiers, diplomats, mercenaries, monks, bankers, you name it, the Templars fit the bill. The greatest fighting force in Christendom, the militia of Christ.
Jeez.
There's a little more to talk about, though.
How did the Templars get their name?
From the building in which they set up their headquarters. The King of Jerusalem gave them part of a mosque on the Temple Mount. It was said to have been the site of the original Temple of Solomon. The order became known first as the Knights of the Temple, and later as the Knights Templar.
You're a mine of information, Andre.
Glad to be of help, Georgie.
It's sort of his job to know, after all.
How come the Templars became so wealthy?
There was a constant stream of new recruits to their ranks, many from noble families. They were required to swear a sacred oath of poverty, chastity, and obedience. So, their money, goods, and lands were donated to the order. The Templars soon held land in France, Scotland, England, Spain, most of Europe, in fact. The poor Knights of Christ became the wealthiest power in Christendom.
Wealthy in a sort of collective way, yes. Not individually, though. Although I suppose a king could see all of that land and be a little bit envious. I could definitely see some people not liking the Knights Templars because of that. Just basically vying for all the power they apparently had, or most likely did have back in the day, actually. There's no apparently about it. They had a lot of land, and they had a lot of resources, and a lot of wealth. And that was a lot of power.
Is it true the treasure of the Knights Templar was never found?
Who knows? So little knowledge of what really happened remains. Or, if it does, the truth has never been made public.
What do you mean by that?
The Templars have attained mythological status, like the King Arthur of the Britons. There are people even now who say the Templars still exist.
Do you think that's likely?
No, not for a minute.
I think you might be surprised, considering the title of the game, but hey! Maybe they are all gone. Maybe. It's looking less and less likely as we're going through, isn't it? Just a little.
The manuscript is being looked after by a friend.
In Paris?
Yeah. Not far from here, in fact.
Well, just give me the address and I'll come round and take a look.
I'm not so sure about that. Maybe I should check with her first.
A female friend?
Yeah, she's a woman. Maybe it was my imagination, but I noticed a predatory look in his eye. Suddenly, this friendly historian had turned into the big bad wolf.
I think we need to talk to Nicole first before we mention about the address of where she lives. I think that's only a sensible thing to do.
Thanks for your help, Andre.
You're welcome.
Let's go and talk to Nicole, shall we? Maybe, hopefully the museum is still open by the time we get back. It would kind of be awkward if it wasn't, considering the fact that the tripod is going to be stolen. pretty soon. But hey, if she says it's okay, then we'll tell him the address. For now, however, let's just go and talk to Nicole. Off we go! Nudge the door. And in. Hello. How are you?
Hi.
There was no subtitle for that.
Hello, George.
There are a few things we can talk about. Definitely a few things we can talk about.
Have you found out any more about the Knights Templar?
Yes, I have. The guy responsible for their downfall was Philippe IV, the King of France, otherwise known as Philippe le Bel. Well, he is known to history as Philippe the Fair, but I doubt if the Templars called him that. I'm sure André will tell you all about him.
Yes, about André.
Do you mind if Lobineau sees the manuscript?
I guess not.
He wants to come over. Shall I give him your address?
Yes, that's fine. Maybe he'll make sense of the manuscript.
Fair enough. We got permission to, tell him the address.
Lobineau explained who the Hashashin were.
Yeah?
The cult of the assassins.
Oh, boy!
Well, let's go and talk to André. Also, I don't think she was happy to hear that news at all. The sarcasm said it all.
I have to go.
Okay. Good luck.
Thank you. We're gonna go and rescue a tripod, because I'm pretty sure that's what we're gonna have to do. That tripod is most certainly going to be stolen. In some form or another. And we're gonna have to make sure that doesn't happen. And I get the feeling this is going to be one of those, hey, here's a situation where you can die points. But first, let's go and talk to André and give him the address. He might be able to shed some light on the manuscript after all. Not exceptionally heavy light though, because that might damage the manuscript over time. Hello again. Let's hand over that address, shall we? Hello.
Hi, André.
Hello, Georgie.
I have an address for you. Also, I have a piece of information for you to ask about too.
What can you tell me about Philippe le Bel?
He was responsible for the extermination of the Knights Templar.
I know that, but why was Philip so hot to get rid of them?
Mostly because he wanted to get his hands on their treasure. He had an enormous debt and a lifelong war with England to fund. The trouble was, the Templars were a highly respected holy order.
So he got the Inquisition on them?
If the Templars were so powerful, how did this Philippe dude wipe them out?
By underhanded, dishonorable means, of course. The Pope was Clement V, a Frenchman.
French, huh? Handy for Philippe.
Fate had nothing to do with it. He was Philippe's puppet, planted to further his political ambitions. Philippe wanted the wealth of the Templars and used Clement to get it.
He basically had Clement apply pressure?
So what was Philippe's plan? What happened?
Sealed orders were sent out all over France, not to be opened until the appointed day. That day was Friday, July 13th. That's the origin of our superstition regarding that date. At dawn, throughout the whole of France, the Templars were arrested. It was the biggest bust in the history of the world.
And they were all forced to confess things they didn't do?
What happened to the Templars after their arrest?
Philippe was out for blood, so he handed the Templars over to the Inquisition. Not surprisingly, they confessed to a sensational and sordid list of blasphemies.
Like what?
Oh, the sort of things you read about in the gutter press. Devil worship, lewd sexual practices, spitting on the Holy Cross, that kind of thing.
Well, that must have given their lawyers some headaches.
Whether or not the accusations were true, this was not good publicity. Most of the charges were probably cooked up, but so were the Templars, literally. Hundreds of them were found guilty of heresy and flame grilled at the stake. They died protesting their innocence.
Well, this pretty much confirms a lot of the information that Nicole told us when consulting the manuscript.
But surely Philippe had no proof of his charges against the Templars.
A man will admit anything under torture. The Inquisition fabricated some nonsensical demon called Baphomet, and then suggested to their victims that this was what they worshipped.
But they didn't have to agree.
The records show a Templar coming to trial with both feet burnt off. Fragments of flesh and charred bone falling from the stumps. What would you not admit to stop such torment?
So there was no truth at all in the Baphomet accusations?
Not a shred. Almost every victim described the idol differently. No, Baphomet never existed outside the sick minds of the Inquisitors.
And there's a little more to talk about here. There's a lot of conversation here.
So Philippe stole the Templars' riches, huh?
Oh no, they weren't stupid. The king's troops marched first on the temple in Paris, then to the Templar home port at La Rochelle. There was no trace of the treasure, and the fleet of the Knights Templar had set sail.
And so, there was no treasure at all for Philip.
This friend who has the manuscript,
Oui, the anonymous girlfriend.
she lives at 361 Rue Jarry.
Ah, I know it well. I'll drop by. Just as soon as I can.
Okay, and he'll go help look at the manuscript.
Thanks for your help, Andre.
You're welcome.
And now we're going to have to find a way to stay in the museum. Because we most certainly want to stay in the museum and stop this theft from happening. So, when we come back, folks, a scheme must occur. I have a theory that I can use to get into that sarcophagus. It involves a distraction. Hopefully it'll work. So, I'll catch you next time, folks. And I'll see you then. Later.